we were able to do we were able to do a terrific amount of analytical work, identifying flows of phosphorus and other contaminants into the lake, and identifying ways that we could mitigate that phosphorus. But what the board recognized in about 2018 is that half of one person was never going to be able to translate the great analytical work that Pat and our consultants were doing into real practical solutions for the lake. So we launched a capital campaign a couple of years ago, with the goal being to generate enough donations, raise enough resources so we could have a whole team of professionals. And that team of professionals would be not just analyzing the water quality, but also leading the effort to mitigate the problems identified in the analyses and make sure that our great analytical work was actually implemented on the ground. So this year we had 4 full-time employees, and as I said before, that's up from 1/2 of an employee just a couple of years ago. Basically, we increased our professional staff over the summer 8-fold, and that shows up a lot in just about every way. And what we're going to do is take you through a couple of things this evening. The first of those is the value of Winnipesaukee, which of course is sort of the economic reflection of the lake's beauty and special place in our hearts. And then we're also going to go through the practical things that we've done to protect that. Before I hand off to Pat, though, I want to say a quick thank you to the board members who have been so critical in helping us to raise the funds and helping us to build the organization from where we were a couple of years ago to where we are today. So Diane Hanley, our vice president, maybe you could give a quick wave, is on the call this evening. Actually, Diane's having technical trouble, so I'm not sure if she hears me well enough to wave. I can't see everybody at once.
Can you see me?
Good. Tim Baker, our treasurer, is on the line. We're especially lucky to have a professional CFO, or a retired professional CFO as our treasurer. That makes a huge difference. Rick DeMark, who I'm pretty sure is our longest tenured board member. If I've offended somebody, I hope you're not too upset, but I'm pretty sure that Rick is our longest tenured board member. He's our secretary. He's on tonight as well. And Larry Greeley, who, for those of you who know him, is certainly our most gregarious board member. He's on this evening. And our one final board member couldn't be here with us tonight, Ann Quant. She's our newest board member. She had some family issues that she had to take care of, but she's been a huge help over the past year. And she's going to be shooting for Rick's record in tenure just a few decades from now. If that's it on, I think that is it on my piece. I want to hand off to the person who's been just such a magnificent leader for us for over 10 years now, and has really done virtually all of the heavy lifting while the rest of us have been cheerleading. So Pat, it is off to you. Thanks again for all your help.
Thanks, Peter. So back in February, I believe it was, one of our board members, actually, Peter just mentioned her, Ann Quant, wanted to see if we could have this valuation of Lake Winnipesaukee done. The Nelson Rockefeller Center at Dartmouth College had done a similar analysis for Lake Champlain, and it was pretty impressive. So we reached out to the Nelson Rockefeller Center in February and asked them if they would consider doing the same type of analysis for Winnipesaukee. Normally, they actually do these at the request of a state agency, but they agreed to take this on, and in June, they presented their results to us. So really, the report estimates the total economic value of Winnipesaukee based on the surrounding property, the recreational revenues, and the water itself. And, you know, as the largest lake in New Hampshire, this is pretty important, and it's important to understand the impact on the state as well as the local economy. And hopefully that the results of this report can inform future policy decisions about the lake. So the analysis uses a quantitative methodology, the same one they used for the Lake Champlain study. They looked at grand list, tax records, existing data, and also interviewed some property owners. There will be three main focus areas to this analysis: property values, business revenue, and water revenues. So beginning with property values, in order to conduct the analysis, the assessed value and the revenue, town tax revenue generated from these properties were looked at for the 8 shorefront towns. As mentioned, property values were determined from the grand lists, which will list the values of commercial and residential properties. The only exception in this report is for Center Harbor and Tuftonboro, which were actually left out at the beginning of the analysis. And so they were brought in at the end, and the information for those 2 towns was gleaned from town reports and the town's websites. If properties were on another lake, such as Squam Lake, but within the same town, they were excluded from this analysis. So I think I meant Squam Lake. So for the assessed value, the mill rate for each town was then multiplied by the assessed value to generate the town tax value. So as you can see, here are the results. You know, kind of impressive to me that the assessed value for the 8 shorefront towns is almost $16.5 billion, which generates tax revenue for the communities of a little over $216 million. The second major component of the valuation was regional business revenues. The primary source of revenue looked at included tourism, fishing and boating, and summer camps. These categories capture a variety of money-generating activities at the lake. And due to time constraints, not all revenue from each type of business activity was possible to collect. The total tourism revenues identified by this report rely on an analysis conducted by the Dean Runyon Associates, which is an independent economic analysis firm contracted by New Hampshire Tourism. The data used to estimate business revenues focuses on the spending of visitors, which is used synonymously with travelers to the lake. Any visitor to a New Hampshire destination, including both state resident and non-residents, is included. So Dean Runyon Associates classifies visitors by accommodation type, and they include 6 categories of accommodation. Commercial accommodations, which includes hotels, bed and breakfast establishments, motels, resorts, and similar types of establishments where a meals and rooms tax is collected. Public and private campgrounds were included, vacation homes, which can include a secondary home or a timeshare, rental properties, and finally day visitors who don't stay overnight, as the name suggests. So total tourism spending in the Lakes region, you can see from this graph, has increased consistently over the past 10 years. The 2020 is a bit of an outlier, but that's to be expected due to COVID-19. So the total Lakes region tourism revenue for 2020 is approximately $400 million. Lake Winnipesaukee, according to the New Hampshire State Economists, accounts for about 75% of the total spending spent in the Lakes region. So that factor, 75%, was applied to the 400 million, which results in approximately 300 million being attributed to Lake Winnipesaukee. So as the largest lake in New Hampshire, Lake Winnipesaukee is a popular destination for both boating and fishing. Boat rentals from local marinas are a large source of revenue on the lake by both tourists and locals. A few marinas representing various size categories provided the researchers with estimates of their annual revenue, as well as the number of boats rented per season and the average season length. This information was used to estimate the revenue for the other marinas. And so as this approach says, marinas were grouped into small, medium, and large. And using the information provided from the few marinas, that was extrapolated to all of the other marinas around Winnipesaukee, resulting in an approximate revenue of $107 to $625 million. There are several different types of fishing licenses sold in New Hampshire, from 1 day, 3 days, 7 days to a yearly license. And there are varying price levels based on the type of license and whether you are a resident or a non-resident. As the research team was unable to obtain data by type of license sold, an estimate was made that each non-resident license brings in an average of $35.35, which is the mean fishing license price across all the types of licenses. And each resident license brings in an average of $27.50, which is the mean fishing price for a resident. Using these price numbers and maintaining the 32% to 68% non-resident to resident license breakdown, which was obtained by Fish and Game, we applied that to the number of licenses sold, and we accounted for 35% of the total licenses could be attributed to Winnipesaukee as the largest lake. That estimated a revenue of a little over $1.6 million for the state of New Hampshire. Summer camps were also included in this analysis. Most of the camps on Winnipesaukee operate from the end of June until August for around 8 to 9 weeks, with changeover days between sessions. 2 camps in particular, Camp Belknap, located in Tuftonboro, and Camp Kabayun in Alton, provided insightful information on how camps contribute to the financial health of the region. Camp Kabayun serves around 200 campers each year, employs 60 to 64 staff, with tuition revenue around $1 million. Other revenue streams include fundraising, which generates between $80,000 to $200,000, their family camp segment, which generates between $50,000 to $60,000 annually, and property rentals to outside groups, which generate another $20,000 to $30,000. Camp Kabayun pays around $95,000 per year in property taxes. Camp Belknap, which is one of the larger camps in the area, serves around 1,300 campers for 9 weeks. Camp Belknap prides itself on their financial transparency and publishes an annual report and their 990 on their website. The total revenue for 2019 was a little over $5.3 million, with $2.8 million derived from contributions and grants and $2.3 million from programs and services. So in determining a total value that summer camps bring to the region, and using a total of 12 summer camps that operate in the area, revenue per camper from Camp Kabayun was approximately $5,000. And at Belknap, it's about $4,100. So an average of $4,500 was used as a revenue number per camper. 2 camps were categorized as small, 5 as medium, and 3 as large, generating that total summer camp revenue of a little over $42 million, or actually closer to $43 million. And finally, the last segment included in the analysis is the value of the water from Winnipesaukee itself. In order to encapsulate this dimension of the analysis, the revenue that the water supply to the individual towns was assessed, as well as revenue from the Lakeport Dam in Laconia. So in conducting the study, the research team considered including the value of the untapped water supply. However, ultimately, it was decided not to include it in the analysis, as it's the only component in which the water is unutilized and it's difficult to place a monetary value on it. In terms of water supply by town, Laconia is the only town that draws water from the lake. Its system serves 16,500 customers and has an average daily demand of a little over 1.3 million gallons per day, priced at $2.35 per 100 cubic feet of water. Once those gallons were converted to 100 cubic feet, the revenue per day translates to $4,198 or approximately $1.5 million annually. The second aspect of water supply revenue comes from the Lakeport Dam, which is owned by Eagle Creek Renewable Energy, an owner, operator, and developer of hydroelectric power projects. The company owns and operates 85 hydroelectric facilities in the US. The Lakeport Dam specifically produces 2.4 million kilowatt hours of clean energy per year. So in determining the value of the electricity generated, the average retail price of electricity, $17.50, was multiplied by the dam's output, yielding the $41,160,000. Adding in the assessed value and the taxes, the total value for the Lakeport Dam comes in at a little over $42 million. So in summary, Lake Winnipesaukee makes significant contributions to the economy, particularly in real estate, tourism, and utilities. If we look at these numbers here and take the property assessment values out, which you could consider somewhat stagnant, annually, revenues generated from town taxes, tourism, and water supply total a little over $700 million. So continued investments in the upkeep and health of Lake Winnipesaukee will be important in maintaining its contributions to the local economy as well as to the New Hampshire economy. So looking at the lake and reviewing what was just presented, is the lake under threat? Yes, it is. Stormwater runoff brings excessive sediment and nutrient loading to the lake. And actually in New Hampshire, stormwater runoff accounts for 85 to 90% of the pollution problems of New Hampshire water bodies. So what are the economic impacts? We just looked at the economic revenue sources. So a decline in water quality could impact recreation revenues, property values, increased costs to address impairments, increased costs for the city of Laconia to use that water supply. Cyanobacteria could result in increased public health risks and costs. The other aspect of this, and this is what the Lake Winnipesaukee Association focuses on, is the ecological impacts from water decline. And really, in reality, it is the ecology of the lake that drives the economy for this region. So ecological impacts from excessive nutrient loading and sediment, it will affect water clarity. Excessive loading feeds algal and plant growth, such as milfoil, cyanobacteria. Excessive development can result in a loss of wildlife and habitat. And ultimately, we're changing the lake's ecology, which could cause a loss in diversity of our fisheries. So I can't really stress enough, it's the ecology that we should be concerned with and focused on. And as an example, Lake Champlain, our neighbor to the west, is 6 times the size of Lake Winnipesaukee. They have a horrendous problem with excessive phosphorus loading. This is a picture of cyanobacteria bloom across a wide area of the lake. Their property values have declined. They are now under EPA mandate to address this issue and clean it up. And it's estimated to cost them $970 million over the next 20 years. They're trying to clean this up by 2037 at a cost of about $48 million per year. And how are they going to pay for it? About half of that, they're looking at property assessments to help cover this cost. So to get to what does LWA do to protect the lake and protect the lake's ecology and the importance of our work, as Peter mentioned, we have been focused for the last 10 years, but Building connections means getting out and talking to individual property owners. It means going out to the municipalities, talking with municipal officials, conservation commissions, planning boards, working with the stakeholders to educate them on these lake issues and make them aware. We're building capacity, and that doesn't mean just our staff. Building capacity means we're increasing our volunteer base through our water quality monitors. We're increasing capacity by the number of stewards of the lake that we've educated and raised awareness. We're building capacity by increasing the number of ambassadors who are going out and working on our behalf and the lake's behalf to spread the word and get people to understand what is at risk. And ultimately, all this leads to building on our outcomes. The more people involved, the more people engage, they are doing things on their own properties to reduce and limit their pollutant footprint. The communities are working to implement best management practices, and the Lake Winnipesaukee Association, through our work, is also implementing best practices. And so at this point, I am going to turn it over to Bree Rossiter, who is our Conservation Program Manager. Bree came on in June. She has been a terrific addition to the Winnie Blue crew, and she hit the ground running. I think she got a little overwhelmed with everything I told her she was going to be responsible for, but she's taken it all in stride and she's been doing a great job. So with that, I'll turn over to you, Bree.
Thank you, Pat. So one thing that is a really big issue for Winnipesaukee is phosphorus. Phosphorus loading to the lake has increased 300% over natural background levels, which means prior to European settlement. The increase in phosphorus does things like fuel the growth of algae, including cyanobacteria, and other aquatic invasive plants like milfoil. 1 pound of phosphorus can support 500 pounds of algae growth. That's a little scale on the bottom. You can see that top picture is milfoil, and the bottom picture is filamentous algae, which often gets confused with cyanobacteria.
Sorry.
Thank you. So like I said before, cyanobacteria is a serious threat to Winnipesaukee. Cyanobacteria are naturally occurring photosynthetic organisms that have known fossil records dating back 3.5 billion years. They can survive in very diverse and extreme habitats. Also, each type of cyanobacteria have a specific growth requirement and the potential to produce toxins at varying rates. Most notably researched are nerve and liver toxins. A lot of people think that if a bloom is toxic in one location, then it also won't be toxic in another, and that it just isn't the case. You could have one bloom of microcystis in one area and another bloom in the area, and the toxin rates for that will vary. We've expanded our monitoring program to include cyanobacteria, and we've also created the Winnie Bloom Watch report and map on our website to be able to act as a resource for people to go to. You can see the top picture on the slides there is Gliotrichia. That was actually sighted near Governor's Island this past summer in late August. The bottom picture is a microcystis and Doligospermum sighting that was in Greens Basin, and that was only from 2 weeks ago. So this can persist throughout the summer and into the fall. The middle picture is actually a bloom that happened on Lake Winnipesaukee this summer. And that is one lake that had had multiple blooms in this summer and last summer as well. Next slide. This summer, there were 14 cyanobacteria sightings that were reported to us and also to New Hampshire DES. So as a result of the increased sightings, we decided to create this Winnie Bloom Watch report and map, which is updated weekly on our website. The information in the interactive map can provide you with the location, the type of cyanobacteria observed, and also the cell counts if they're available. If the sample was taken, DES will analyze those. Something that we recommend is to add your findings to the Winnie Bloom Watch app. If you see a cyanobacteria bloom or even something that you're not necessarily sure what it could be, please reach out to us and to DES. But the Winnie Blue Match app was created by the EPA to be able to track trends throughout New England. So it's also very helpful to add your findings to that as well. Now, no documented blooms have been issued on Winnipesaukee since 2018. Lake Winnipesaukee was on EPA's list for impaired waters for cyanobacteria in 2018, but it has been since removed. Although we are no longer on the list for impaired waters for cyanobacteria, we are still on the list of impaired waters for aquatic life use for not meeting specific nutrient criteria. And these lists are updated every 2 years, so that next update is going to be in 2022. This summer, there were cyanobacteria advisories issued on Lake Winnipesaukee, like I'd said before, and also on Mirror Lake. Advisories are issued by New Hampshire DES when cell counts reach over 70,000 cells per milliliter. So as a result of these sightings, LWA expanded the monitoring program to be able to include cyanobacteria. We've been monitoring and facilitating the Lake Slay monitoring program on Winnipesaukee in cooperation with the UNH Cooperative Extension Lake Slay Monitoring Program for over 20 years. This information gives us some long-term trend data on the health of the lake, and then we also use this data to be able to do watershed and water quality analyses. The driving force behind watershed management planning really is a decline in water quality and an increase in the occurrence of algae and cyanobacteria blooms. The map that I was referring to earlier, can you go back? Thank you. The map that I was referring to earlier, the interactive one on our website, is what is shown on the right here. And then the report card, as well as some additional educational resources and some other materials are on that website as well. So water quality and watershed analysis are completed so that we can determine the amount of load that's coming into the lake and off of the land, and determine how well the lake can assimilate or process that load. So from our analysis, we've estimated that approximately 54,000 pounds of phosphorus is entering the lake annually. And the water quality data that we have does support this estimate. And then these loads, they differ by subwatershed, which is one of the reasons why we do take a subwatershed approach to our watershed management planning. So essentially what I'm saying is that the lake needs to go on a diet. It's taking in way too many nutrients to be able to support it, and everyone can do their part to help by minimizing their impact by 1 pound of phosphorus per year. We need to finish completing the watershed analyses really to be able to have a good understanding of how overweight the lake is and the amount of phosphorus and other nutrients that are coming in, but also to be able to target priority areas and decide where we really should be focusing our efforts. Some developed watersheds can contribute 5 to 10 times the amount of phosphorus and nutrients compared to forested watersheds. Now, this is because human activities like applying phosphorus-rich fertilizers have an impact on the lake. And ultimately, the more load that we have means faster eutrophication. So just like us, lakes age over time, and eutrophication is the process of increased productivity as the lake ages. So this is a natural process. It happens over time, but the increased speed at which this is happening is a concern for us. And because it's due to human influence, it actually has its own definition, which is cultural eutrophication. So we use some of the water quality data that we've collected to be able to do things like calibrate the models that help determine the amount of load that's coming into the watershed. And the map on the right is an example of an estimated pollutant loading calculations that help target and prioritize the areas to focus on, like I was talking about earlier. This map is specifically for the Moltenboro Bay and Winter Harbor subwatershed. And the areas on this map that are in orange are the highest in TP load. So what do the analyses that we do result in? That would be watershed management plans. So we've been the leading organization in creating watershed management plans throughout the entire watershed. These tools act as a guide to be able to help communities and individuals support actions with the ultimate goal to be able to reduce the overall pollutant loading to the lake. Plans have been completed for 6 out of 10 subwatersheds so far. And like I said, we tackle these plans at a subwatershed approach for a variety of reasons. Lake Winnipesaukee has multiple embayments, which have different characteristics and influences. The size and morphology of Lake Winnipesaukee is also an influence to why we decide to tackle it at a subwatershed level. So like I said, plans have been completed for 6 out of 10 subwatersheds so far. We've identified 200 recommendations in these watershed management plans, including things like education goals, wastewater remediation, and land conservation efforts. So we've identified over 250 BMPs, and BMP stands for best management practices. Something to note is that these numbers don't include the recommendations that have been identified for Moltenboro Bay and Winter Harbor. So to date, so far, we have raised over $500,000 through grants or through in-kind match to be invested to help Winnie. So the financial numbers don't include a couple different plans that have been done already. So they don't include what Alton and New Durham have done on the Mary Meeting River or investments that are currently underway with the town of Moltenboro and the Lake Winnipesaukee Watershed Association. They are currently working towards the completion of a watershed management plan for Lake Winnipesaukee. So like I said, the map on the right shows where plans have been completed. The areas in green are the areas where plans have been completed, and the areas in the salmon, pink, reddish color on the map are areas where plans still need to be completed. And you'll see the green portion in the Alton Bay subwatershed is what I was talking about with the Mary Meeting River. That part's been completed already. And there are parts of the Wolfboro Bay subwatershed that were completed by the Wentworth Watershed Association and Lake Wentworth, which is shown in green on the map where the cursor is. So we do still need to complete plans for the rest of Alton Bay, the Broads, and the Center Harbor subwatersheds. The town of Wolfboro is also in the process of doing a watershed management plan, and we are in the process of helping to raise funds for that. All of the watershed management plans are also on the Winnipesaukee Gateway, which can be found on our website. So a little bit more about the Wolfboro Bay Watershed Environmental Study. Watershed management plans are a collaborative effort. It takes a lot of people to be able to get them together, and we use outside consultants, towns, and other organizations to be able to create a collaborative action plan that has measurable goals and outcomes. So the 7 steps that are on this slide are an example of some high-level explanations of the phases that are taken to be able to complete these plans. And these usually take between 1 or 2 years. This is not a small task by any means. So an environmental consultant is hired to be able to do the work, including delineating and mapping the smaller subwatersheds that exist for the tributaries. And then the water quality data from these smaller subwatersheds is compiled and analyzed. After that, water quality goals and pollutant load goals are created to be able to improve water quality through set benchmarks over a period of time. And field assessments and surveys are completed to be able to document existing conditions. Educational outreach is done throughout the entire process and following after to be able to enhance public understanding and increase participation on a rolling basis, even after the watershed management plan is published. So the Wolfboro Bay Watershed Environmental Study and the Watershed Management Plan is estimated to cost about $120,000. So they're not cheap. And we're in the process of, like I said, raising funds to be able to tackle the scope of work that we have listed in the slides. Also, there used to be some federal grant money that was available through EPA to be able to support the planning of these watershed management plans, but unfortunately that no longer exists. There are still funds available to complete the work that's prioritized in these plans, and those funds are eligible through what is known as the 319 grant. So these management plans result in action plans, and the action plans identify and prioritize certain mitigation sites, and they're represented on this map right here. It's not comprehensive. It's missing the projects listed from Lake Wentworth and the Mary Meeting River, among others, but we will be working this winter to update that map and get it on our website. What we know is that we have not documented every single site that is out there, and something else to note is that we're restricted to public property. So it doesn't include some of the other projects that towns have completed. For example, Wolfboro has received other 319 grants to be able to do additional work. Those need to be updated on the map. So the investment costs are much greater than what's actually shown here. And in addition to that, the load reductions are also a lot bigger. There's a lot of work that needs to get done is essentially what we're saying here. The estimated cost for over 250 restoration sites is over $2.5 million. So over 40 projects have been completed so far, which is fantastic. They've resulted in a load reduction of 114 pounds of TP per year and 64,800 pounds of total suspended solids, or TSS. So total suspended solids are particles that are found throughout the water column. They can include sediment, silt, plankton, and algae, and they have an impact on the clarity of the water. So I wanted to share with you an example of a project that was completed. This is at the Winnipesaukee Beach Colony Club in Meredith. Lake Winnipesaukee Association received a grant for $18,000, and then the Winnipesaukee Beach Colony Club contributed $7,000 for a total cost of $25,000 to be able to pay for this project. We are currently in the process of being able to estimate pollutant loads for this project, but essentially 2 bioretention areas were constructed to be able to collect stormwater runoff from 2 culverts to be able to allow for filtration and treatment of the stormwater prior to it entering Cummings Cove. And bioretention is just referring to the process that removes contaminants and improves water quality. So the picture on the left is what the project area looked like before we did any work. The middle picture is what it looks like now with that bioretention area. And then I wanted to also share with you the picture on the right. That was a second bioretention area, which they also decided to create a rain garden with. So we have a lot planned for 2022. We're in the process of securing a grant to be able, 319 grant, to be able to complete projects in Tuftonboro and Wolfboro. So there are 3 BMPs that are going to be completed in Wolfboro, and 2 of them are shown on the slides here. These BMPs will result in a nutrient load reduction of 20,000 pounds of total suspended solids and 13 pounds of phosphorus annually to Moltenboro Bay. So the top left picture is a culvert on New Road in Tuftonboro. A total of 109 sites in the 2020 Moltenboro Bay Winter Harbor Watershed Management Plan were found, and it was actually the highest ranking priority site, which contributed an estimated 20,400 pounds of TSS annually and 10 pounds of phosphorus annually as well. Right now, some unmitigated road runoff is really eroding the eastern slopes of that culvert. So the design of this project is to divert stormwater runoff off of New Road before it reaches the head wall of the culvert. And also 2 bioswales are proposed to encourage drainage away from the Melvin River. The bottom right picture is on Northwoods Road in Tuftonboro. The design intent for this is to be able to embrace the existing stormwater flow patterns by installing a sediment forebay to provide for pre-treatment, which is going to be followed by the installation of a rain garden to be able to collect and filter that runoff. And then mitigation for this is estimated to reduce sediment and nutrient loading to Moltenboro Bay by 7,500 pounds of total suspended solids and 3 pounds of phosphorus per year. So overall, these 3 projects are going to achieve 32% of the targeted phosphorus role that was set in the watershed management plan for Moultonborough Bay and Winter Harbor. So this equates to about 41, a little less than 42 pounds of total phosphorus per year. And also, in addition to that, as part of this 319 grant, we are going to be working with the town of Wolfboro to address some problems on Whitegate Road. We're going to be working to replace existing driveway culverts and to stabilize 3 drainage channels. This is going to reduce the sediment and nutrient loading to Winter Harbor by about 3,400 pounds of total suspended solids per year and 1.4 pounds of total phosphorus per year. So every little bit that we're doing is cumulatively adding up and taking that much more sediment and TP away from the lake every year by doing these projects. In addition to the larger scale projects or the BMP projects that we've been working on, we also work with property owners to be able to determine what they can do to help keep Winnie clean. The reality of the situation is that the majority of the watershed really is residential. So if we're going to be able to succeed in reducing nutrient loading on a larger scale, everyone has a part to play. With that being said, I'm going to turn this over to Abby Dalton to talk about how we've been working with property owners. Abby joined us this summer as well as our conservation program assistant. She's a recent graduate, a great addition to our Winnie Blue crew, and we are very happy to have her here on staff. So, Abby?
Thanks so much, Bree. So I'm going to be talking about our Winnie Blue and Lake Smart program. So the Winnie Blue and Lake Smart program is a free, voluntary, non-regulatory evaluation to determine how lake-friendly a property is. We also provide simple and cost-effective recommendations for improvements on properties. So LWA had been doing site visits for a few years, and we did it under our Be Winnie Blue program. But this year we partnered with New Hampshire Lakes, their Lake Smart program, to offer a more comprehensive evaluation and assessment. So on Lake Winnipesaukee, we're calling this the Be Winnie Blue and Lake Smart program. So this summer we were able to complete 26 site visits, and out of those, 4 properties were awarded the Winnie Blue and Lake Smart status. So the shorefront is our first line of defense when it comes to protecting Winnie and minimizing the impacts of polluted runoff. And it is actually easier than you may think. So during our Be Winnie Blue and Lake Smart assessment, we start at the top of your property, which would be the driveway or like where the road meets your driveway, and we work all the way down to the shorefront. So I'm going to go through some of the sections that we go through in the evaluations. So next slide, please. So we begin by reviewing the driveway and parking areas. Runoff from driveway and parking areas can wash away pollutants into nearby bodies of water or lakes, tributaries and wetlands that might drain into Lake Winnipesaukee. So as you can see on the picture on the left, there are piles of pine needles, which indicate the direction of runoff, where stormwater water flows and where the erosion can occur. So having a well-maintained impervious driveway, like the picture you see on the right, stabilizes the ground and minimizes the potential for any pollutants to run off into the lake. So unlike traditional pavers, rain and runoff water flow through the pervious surfaces and soak into the ground, which providing stable surfaces for vehicles and foot traffic. So if any vehicles or people are walking over it, it stabilizes the ground better and prevents any extra sedimentation from entering the lake. Next slide. Okay. So after that, we look at structures and septic systems. In this section, we review drip lines, leach fields, and outdoor oil tanks. So a drip line infiltration trench, which is seen on the right, helps runoff water from the roof soak into the ground and prevent any erosion, which you can see on the left. In this section, we also discuss wastewater treatment systems and look at leach fields. So leach fields, we're checking to see if it's free of any woody shrubs or vegetation, saplings, stuff like that, because roots from woody shrubs can actually cause damage to your system and lead to costly malfunction. So we recommend that you get your septic tank pumped every 2 to 3 years and inspected every 3 to 5 years, depending on your usage and capacity, if you're only there part-time or full-time during the summer. So please be aware that these are separate processes to pump outs and can provide useful information on the span of your system and identify any repairs or maintenance needed for your system. Next slide. So after that, we review yard recreation areas and footpaths. So we check to see if any areas of bare soil are stabilized, which also minimizes the amount of soil worn away by foot traffic and minimizes the amount of sediment running off into the lake. So sedimentation can harm fish and other aquatic organisms, as well as adding excess nutrients. So the picture on the left shows an example from a gravel from a driveway being washed into the lake. I know it's a little bit hard to see, but you can kind of see those gray patches in the picture, which is the gravel from the driveway. So installing pervious walkways made out of traditional pavers or large flagstones, which is seen on the right, with crushed stone or like a natural mulch, which is in that picture, underneath can help soak off that water before it enters the lake. Next slide. So finally, we end our evaluation by looking at the shoreline and water access points. Vegetative buffers between any structures in the lake help slow down and naturally filter stormwater runoff. So the bigger the buffer is better, which you can actually see on the bottom left as a pretty decent sized buffer. Wave action can also take a big toll on shorelines. So sediment washed into the lake actually brings in phosphorus, which was recently talked about. So the nutrient that phosphorus is a nutrient that encourages the growth of plants, algae, and toxic cyanobacteria. Increasing native plants on your shoreline can help stabilize that soil and help keep your shorefront intact. You can also prevent sand from being washed off or worn off your sandy beach by minimizing how often you replenish your sand. An even better option would be retrofitting the area to a perched beach. And a perched beach can be seen in the picture on the top right. It's a platform located entirely out of the water, and it prevents sand from being washed away by wave action or runoff. So without a properly sized vegetative buffer, undercutting of a shoreline can occur, and you can see a little bit undercutting on the top left. Stone or wooden stairs, which is shown on the bottom right, provide access to and from water. And also, in order to construct a perched beach, a state permit is required. Once we complete our assessment, which usually takes less than an hour, we go back to the office and compare notes. After that, we will follow up with a personalized report with specific recommendations tailored to your property. After that, we will determine if you are Winnie Blue and Lake Smart, or we'll take the next steps to get there. So we are doing our property assessments for anyone in the Winnipesaukee watershed. You do not have to be a shorefront property. We conduct our site visits between May and October, and there are 3 easy steps you can take to start your journey to being Winnie Blue and Lake Smart. The first step, you should head to our website using the link at the bottom of this slide and click the Winnie Blue Crew tab to get your self-assessment. After you completed your self-assessment, you'll receive a personalized PDF with general recommendations on ways to improve your property if you need them. And then finally, after that, you can request a site visit and get on our waiting list for next spring. So because protection requires investment, our treasurer, Tim Baker, will talk about some of the efforts over the past 3 years to increase our capacity. So I'm actually going to pass this over to our treasurer, Tim Baker.
Okay, great. Thanks, Abby. Good evening, everybody. As Peter mentioned earlier, we initiated a capacity building campaign in 2018 to enable us to build out our infrastructure, to grow our programs, and to increase our participation in mitigation projects. From 2017 to 2020, our revenue has increased 149%, from $90,000 in 2017 to $224,000 in 2020. In the last 3 years, 2018 to 2020, we've raised over $500,000 to support our mission. We want to thank you for that support. And we've put that money to good use. As you can see, all these programs that the women have been speaking about. Our investments have increased accordingly based on our funds that we've been able to raise. Since 2017, our funds were about $71,000 in investments. That's increased to $206,000 in 2020. That's a 190% increase in our investments back into our mission. In 2020, we invested 92% of our revenue into expanding our organization and supporting our programs. We hired additional staff, we expanded our program participation, and we performed additional mitigation work. This has been a good start over the past 3 years, but there's still much more to do. Additional funding will allow us to increase our investments and further our mission to keep Winnie blue. I want to thank you for your continued support. And at this time, I'd like to introduce you to Michelle Lowe. Michelle just joined us recently, 6 months ago, as our Director of Development and Outreach. She's been doing a great job getting out there, meeting with you, and telling our story. Michelle?
All right, thanks, Tim. So yes, the theme of the day is protection does require investment. And I hope that what's resonating is to everybody is small dollars now really will avoid costly dollars down the road if we do nothing. So one thing I hear from everybody is, how can I help? How can I help? Well, there's a lot of very easy ways that everyone can reduce their phosphorus footprint, and that's the biggest way to help. So these easy steps to reduce your phosphorus footprint would include, if you have to use fertilizer, use a phosphate-free fertilizer and phosphate-free cleaning products as well. In terms of property, shorefront property owners, plant native shrubs and small trees. And by native, things like blueberry bushes, white birch, rhododendrons. The root systems from those plants will catch the stormwater runoff and filter the sediment, reducing the P load into the lake. The other thing, again, we're going to push you to our website because we have tons of resources there, tools to learn about your own personal impact with your P load. And, we have the Winnie Gateway Phosphorus Calculator to track that impact. And then, of course, for a B Winnie Blue and Lake Smart property assessment. Everybody can help be a steward by creating awareness, and that's the one thing I tell everyone. Talk to your neighbors on the left, talk to your neighbors on the right. Please tell your family and friends about LWA, about becoming a member, and about how they can also reduce their phosphorus footprint. And so the other thing a lot of folks ask me about is, how does a membership have impact? Well, there's a lot of different ways that a membership has impact. And a few examples here, our Winnie Watcher membership at $100, that basically helps with general support for LWA on a daily basis as we combat pollutants and mitigate threats. The Winnie Steward membership at $250, that'll pay for a Winnie Blue Lake Smart site assessment. A Winnie Guardian membership at $500, that helps pay for one water quality monitoring kit. And our leadership donors at $1,000 or more, we typically will ask them to direct those funds towards one of the major restoration projects. And again, as Bree mentioned earlier, we have both the Melvin River and the Wolfboro Bay environmental study that'll be taking place in 2022, and typically those are more than just 1 year. And then there are larger donors that'll ask about a five-figure donation. And an example there would be $10,000 is a strategic initiative to add staffing. And something next summer is going to bring is additional site assessments. We're going to need more Abbeys, and we need a $10,000 donation would in fact cover staffing for a part-time conservation assistant. So I'd like to take a minute right now to just say thank you to everybody who's been a member and a donor and helped contribute to LWA, because we certainly could not do our great work day in and day out without the help of all of our members, no matter what the size. With that, we have two very special members that we'd like to identify and call out tonight. The first of which is a long-term member and Bruce Pardo from the Pardo Family and Foundation. The Pardo family's been with us for many, many years, and they were very gracious in honoring LWA with a valedictory grant of $100,000 spread out over the next 4 years from the Samuel P. Foundation. And Bruce is also the board chair for the Prescott Farm Environmental Education Center. Bruce, take it away. Is Bruce with us?
No, unfortunately.
Oh, he's not
No,
here.
he's
Oh.
not. So Michelle, if you would
Okay.
acknowledge Alexis.
Yes, I sure will. So on two very different levels, there's Alexis is also here, and yet very important for LWA on both levels. So Alexis is an LWA member and also a swimmer. And she helped us out this summer with her Make Waves for Winnie swim, where she created tremendous awareness around the lake and raised $2,800 for LWA. Alexis, tell us a little bit about your story.
Hi, everybody. I don't know, can you see and hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. It's been my privilege and honor to participate in a couple long distance swims to raise awareness and funds for Lake Winnipesaukee Association. And I'm just blown away by the presentation tonight. You're doing so much for the lake, and it's my pleasure to help out. I did a 2.5 mile swim along the broadside length of Rattlesnake Island. And as you said, we raised some money, but most importantly, I think I raised awareness. I'm very pleased that a lot of my long-term friends are now aware of the Lake Winnipesaukee Association. This was my 70th year on the lake, and our family is enjoying 5 generations at the lake, and along with many other folks we know. And we're just happy to help out.
Thank you, Alexis. We certainly appreciate your enthusiasm and your support.
You're welcome.
Thanks. So that concludes the main part of our program tonight, and we will take questions at this time. We would ask our members to stay on for the business portion of the meeting following this. I promise it will be very short, but we do have some questions in the chat room, I believe. And so Bree, if you want to bring those up.
Sure. So sorry, have it. So the first question is, how much of the nutrient loading is already embedded in the lake bottom?
Okay, that's a great question. And we do have an understanding that we probably have a legacy of phosphorus in the sediment of the lake. How much is actually there, we don't know. And only through taking some sediment cores will we be able to really answer that question. So we haven't done any sediment cores yet. I think it's probably expensive, but it is something that we should keep in mind in future. Next.
The next question is, which regional and state leaders should see the value of Winnipesaukee presentation, and how can that happen?
So great question. I think all of our state reps should actually see and understand the value of Winnipesaukee, from the governor to the executive council to, as I just mentioned, our state reps. In addition, our local municipalities at the select boards, planning boards, conservation commission should understand and realize the value that this lake brings locally and regionally. All of these groups actually were invited to the presentation tonight, so some of them might be here. I know we have a DES person on the Zoom, so that's great. But this, I don't know if we mentioned this at the beginning, this presentation will be recorded and up on our website for anybody who wasn't able to make it tonight. Next.
The third question is, can LWA conduct Winnie Blue Lake Smart assessments in urban areas where lots drain to catch basins with direct discharge into the lake? So I would like to answer this question. We can conduct, and I answered this in the chat as well, but we are happy to conduct assessments for any property owner in the Winnipesaukee watershed that is willing to have us come out, whether it be rural or urban. We're happy to be there. And I think that is the last question.
So are there any other questions from folks? I think we could unmute. If not, I'm going to turn it over to Peter Glick again, president of our association, to conduct the business portion.